Okay, black pieces. Black pieces. Let's see here. World is my oyster. All right, we're going to play C6. The Caro-Kann. Let's see how he wants to play against it. D4 is the most anticipated and natural second move. Sometimes people are playing the 2 knights Caro-Kann, but D4 is pretty good for now. So play D5. The nice thing about the Caro-Kann is, well, if you mess up on the first 2 moves of the Caro-Kann, guess what? You need a new opening. If you can't get the first 2 moves of the Caro-Kann correct, I'm telling you, you're playing the wrong opening. Bishop to F5. Some people like the line C5. I don't. I do not think that the move C5 is a good move. That might be a controversial take, but move C5, you might think it works well because it's almost like a French, but if white knows what they're doing, the move C5 is, I would say, on the riskier side for sure. Most players are happy to play against the move C5. Just a pleasant thing for them to see. Bishop D3, though, I mean, what are we talking about with Bishop D3? I put my bishop here to get it outside the pawn chain to play E6. So, of course, if you're going to offer me a bishop trade, I'm in there. Take it. And the most important move in the Caro-Kann, if you let your opponent play E6 in the Caro-Kann against you as white, I know it sounds crazy, but as white, if they play E6, you are often in a really, really bad position. So E6 by black is so key. So key. Need to play it. Okay, let's discuss how we're actually going to develop our pieces here. Anyone have any ideas? Let's say I've got these 3 pieces. How are they all going to reach a development square? How are we going to get them out? Because they all need a square, and a few of them bump into each other. We want to make sure there's enough room for all of them. I see a lot of knight e7, knight f5. A lot of knight e7, knight f5. I see a ton of knight e7. I see a little bit of knight h6, but, you know, for the most part, that's to be avoided. Okay. Let me ask you guys, because most people haven't really mentioned it. Where's this knight going? Just because maybe you all knew where it was going, you just didn't write it. But where's it going? It's going to d7. Okay. So it's going to d7. And then sometimes I see knight e7, I saw bishop e7, I saw knight e7, knight f5. Let me give you a piece of advice. If you know where something's going, put it there. This knight's going to go to d7 in every single variation. So just put it there. You start with knight e7, you might just confuse yourself a little bit. Knight d7. We know for a fact that the knight is going to d7. So start with that. That just makes your life a lot easier. Okay, knight d7. Now we can think about the next idea. Knight e7, knight f5. An insanely popular suggestion. Very popular. Okay. Now, problem I have with knight f5, and it might not be a permanent thing, but knight f5 is not a fully permanent square. Just because there's a g4 idea. Now, it's not bad, but it's not permanent. Bishop e7 is definitely bad, because that takes the square from your knight. That's no good. So we can definitely agree that our knight needs to go to e7 because we're not playing this and we're not playing that. So of course you're correct that the knight wants to go to e7. But it doesn't really make a ton of sense for us to commit, let's say, knight e7, knight f5, when there's a potentially better square available, maybe on c6, something like c5, knight e7, knight c6. I could see something like that working. Because the knight on c6, it's a lot of the central squares. Not bad at all. The move c5 is now supported by our knight, now that we put the knight there. But wouldn't be against maybe a move c5. And it's nice that we prepared it with the knight a little bit. I do think that c5 on the previous turn would have been just ever so slightly hasty on the previous move. Takes, bishop takes, queen b5 check, hits the pawn, check, hits the bishop. Just a little bit odd. So the knight kind of needs to be here first. And if we had played c5 and maybe tried to put the knight on c6, well then our other knight has its square taken away from it. So this, I think, makes a little bit more sense in that regard. Now we have the check blocked, and our knight is going to enjoy a potentially short journey to the c6 square. Knight e7, takes, knight takes, queen b5 check, hits our king, hits the pawn, hits the knight. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with that? If we play queen d7, we're going to lose our knight on c5. If we play knight d7, we're going to lose our pawn on b7. Well, now I've helped you too much because the answer is the only legal move. Knight c6, and the knight is defended by the bishop. The knight defends the pawn. There you go. Now we're ready for this. And let's say bishop e3, maybe to put more pressure here. When we bring our knight there, and the pawn will also be defended twice. So we're not scared of that anymore. Thank you to Midnight and Dr. Lord Mayonnaise. $10 donation, but it doesn't support us. So make sure to keep sending in $10. I promise it does not support us. Don't support these guys. It's giving, but I'm not a rapper kind of energy. Thank you for the 10. Oh, is that 10 pounds from ABD? Wow. Wow. Now I know what they mean when they say the camera adds 10 pounds. They were talking about my wallet. Oh. Airbus driver. You little devil, you. Bishop to g5. An annoying move, right? Pinning my knight. Preventing my knight from going to this beautiful square. Well, guess what? We're going to start with one of the greatest moves known to mankind. Not queen b6, you absolute imbeciles. h6. h6. What are we playing queen b6 for? Calm down. Relax. If he wants to take my knight, why would I not be okay with that? I'm going to take back with my bishop. I'm going to get a free h6 move. And once again, this bishop is living a sperm cell life. Bishop g5 takes e7. That's the lifespan of that bishop. That's sperm life right there. That's the one that didn't make it. It's not that impressive. You can't be afraid of moves like this. And look, if the guy's going to play bishop h4, aren't we happier? having h6 and bishop h4, wouldn't you say that this is a small achievement? I like it a lot better. Bishop no longer is on this diagonal. This is a very useful move for me, stopping the pieces from going there. And now, our move queen b6 comes with actual intent. Now I can unpin myself. And if he wants to take me now, go ahead. I got h6 in. So you must start with h6. They put the bishop on g5. It's like, okay, let me ask you a question first. What are you doing? h6. Ask him what he's up to and then continue. Want to take? Go ahead. If not, knight to c6 or knight to f5 with the quickness. Why is knight f5 a much stronger move than it was before? Does anyone know? Oh, that's right. It's because of our fantastic h6 move. It forced the bishop here, so now knight f5, the bishop's only got one square. Genius. Queen c2 played. We like to see moves like this. He's defending, and he hasn't really made any mistakes yet, so credit to him. But queen c2 we like to see because it's just backwards, and it's moving a piece that's already developed, right? He's already moved his queen. So for him to move it again, good for us. All right. After we see queen c2, I mean, hey, a lot of great looking moves here. A lot of great looking moves. I would add rook c8 to our list of candidate moves. I think that's an important one. Right? So now we're starting to look at the queen. Asking the queen a few questions here. He probably has to move the queen again, I'm not going to lie. After rook c8, I think queen b3 is probably necessary. Let's switch that. So rook c8, love. Knight f5, making a threat on this pawn. Also, very, very tempting. Right? Knight f5 with an immediate threat. That would probably make him take. Now, him taking is actually not a bad move. It really isn't. Like, it's quite reasonable. So I want to start with that. Taking is not the worst thing. You might think it's a bad move, and most of the time it is, because you're ruining this pawn structure. But taking for him is almost going to be a necessity in the near future. It really is. Okay. Knight f5 or rook c8. I'm just going to say at this point, I'm feeling that there's a lot of pressure on d4. And I actually think that this bishop is not a good piece. And because I don't think it's a good piece, I think bishop takes e7 is actually an achievement by white. I think at this point the bishop is now not good. So bishop takes e7 would actually be desirable for my opponent. So that's why in this position I'm a little bit more interested in knight f5 because it doesn't even let him capture the knight on e7 anymore. So I like that. So I'm going to go with knight f5 because of that reason mainly. I like rook c8. Believe me, it has a nice little cheapo trick here. Takes, queen takes d4. Ha ha ha. Can't take me. And hey, it might work. But really, if I'm being honest, I do think that bishop takes e7 there in that position is an achievement for white. So I don't want to allow that. That's why I'm playing knight f5. After knight d2, I can win some material. I can. The question is, do we cash it in right now? Takes, I can take here. I can also take here. right? I got stuff to take everywhere. Instead of all that, I could play rook c8. There's stuff like g5, g4, but that's a little convoluted, I think. Way too crazy. Way too fancy. If we play rook c8, once again, my opponent is able to do something which is kind of bothersome. He can take here. I know that you think that's a good thing, but after he takes, notice how I'm no longer threatening to win anything. It's true, I'm not. It looks like fantastic for me, but all of a sudden I'm no longer actually making any threats, which is a little bit sad. Here pawn takes, and it's like, oh, well, actually, that's kind of the end of your threats. So because of that, I'm a lot more interested in taking right away. Taking here and taking here. So I think that's what I'm going to go for. Taking this bishop also allows me to develop with tempo, which is fantastic. If I take here and the pawn takes here, tagging my queen, I've got a check. Take here first, take here first. Allows for more impossible mistakes from my opponent. Always let them blunder. Please, blunder. But I'm probably going to take this bishop. Allows me to develop with tempo in some lines. Queen takes d4 is happening. So the most likely variation is takes. And the reason I don't want to take here is because the knight goes to f3, guards the bishop, and this bishop actually is kind of annoying. I want to put my bishop on e7 and castle. But I will say that bishop's a little bit frustrating to me. So I'm going to take this. I'd rather leave him with two knights than that pesky bishop. And if I don't take now and I go here, the knight's going to come back and guard it. So what the heck did I do all that for? I must take here. Otherwise, there was just no point. Okay, the knight comes back. Also guards this pawn, by the way. Now my queen needs to move. Queen c5 is tempting because, hey, a trade of queens would be absolutely phenomenal. But if he avoids the queen trade, then there's going to be a rook showing up on the c-file and attacking my queen. So not exactly sure that that's in my favor. Queen b6 looks like the safest possible square. Let's say rook c1, bishop e7. In the event that we see queen a4, which is probably the last annoying move to attack my knight and stop me from castling, I think there we can play rook d8 to defend. And after we defend the knight, I've been thinking, and I don't see how my castling can be prevented. So I think I'm in a good spot after that. That's basically what I'm thinking. The only other thing to calculate would be something like this. Queen c5. Where can this queen go? If queen here, maybe queen b6 or queen b4. So that looks okay. Queen d3. Okay. I could go rook c8 maybe and prevent that. But more importantly, if I play bishop e7, rook there, queen back, there's not even this move, queen a4. So I kind of like how this one stops queen a4. That feels pretty good to me. I'm going to go for queen c5, only because I've looked at the squares this queen can go, and I think I have an answer to all of them. Queen here, queen b4, or queen b6. Same thing with that one. I would go to b6 and rook d8. That looks very good, but I think offering a queen trade is pretty nice here. So queen c5. Please trade with me. Masking nicely. You should keep the queens on the board when you think about, just the overall principle of down material, right? If you're down material, you want material on the board, like a queen, to give yourself some chances. Because if everything trades down, it does eventually become kind of easy for the side with the extra material just to win the endgame. So rook c1. Now rook c8 would lose on the spot, I think, to queen d1. So we don't want to try to be a hero here with this move. Almost 100% we're going to be taking this queen. Yeah, not really going to calculate much further, but takes. There's a rook coming into c7 that we need to deal with. So that will be our next mission. Okay. Rook c7. Gotta deal with it. In order to cover this square properly, I think we need to use our bishop. Bishop here, rook c7 hits the pawn. Let's say rook b8, rook c1, bishop d8, rook c8, and we're probably doing enough there after king e7. But it's like it's a little funky. Bishop c5, knight b3, bishop b6, or rook c1, bishop b6. And if we get checked on c8, then we go up to e7. And truly in that position, we have actually done enough. So bishop c5 to b6 does look to me like it covers everything. Just in time. Just in time. And this pawn, so key here. Covering the squares the knight can go to. Same with this pawn. Now, we don't want to allow two pieces for the rook here, so we're absolutely dropping back to b6, covering this square. And oh, man, rook c8's a tempting move. But don't overreact and take it. Just step up with the king, and then all of a sudden it's the white rook that's being ganged up on. And here, even if it was my turn in this position, I would not be castling. I would probably be playing king e7. We're in an endgame. Pieces are looking to be traded. There's no problem with my king here. I want to be in the middle, close to the action. He'll try to flag me now, as he should. That's his win condition at the moment. He's down a pawn. Gotta rely on that. I would do the same thing if I was in his shoes. Knight b3. Actually, he can't use those squares, so the only move he could be intending is knight there. This is an interesting example where I'm actually considering castling. King e7 is above and beyond the best move, but I'm considering castling, and I'm thinking it's because maybe he wants to play a4. So I am actually considering that, but cooler heads are going to prevail. I'm going to put my king on e7. I think castling is interesting. If he had brought the knight here, there might be like a knight takes e5 type of move, and that move works a lot better when my king is castled. But nevertheless, I think king here is the right. It's the right move. So hopefully he sees how important my bishop on b6 is. Because the bishop on b6 is the one covering this square. And it's not like the game's over or something if it moves from that square, but all right, this looks like a pawn. I'm gonna go ahead and take it. He chose to use this knight when he could have used the other one. I was kind of expecting him to do that. The move I was really expecting was a4, a5, because that at least tries to do something to this bishop. f4, I have to say, looks tempting for my opponent here, but I'm really not sure. Knight d3 exists. Knight c6 also just trades a bunch of pieces. So I feel like there's a lot of good moves available after f4 for me. It opens up this diagonal for I don't know what reason. If he played a4, by the way, a6 was possible, but I may have just played a5 to be truly safe there, so that my knight would land. Sorry, so that my bishop would stay nicely on b6. But the other kind of interesting move after a4 was maybe rook to b8. So after this, I could bring the bishop back, and there is no more infiltration on either of those squares because my rooks are tucked away here. Kind of a funny looking move, but I think it was getting the job done. Okay, rook c3. Not sure that it makes a particular threat. Let's bring the rook over. It does cover knight d3, so that's one thing. But now I'm kind of getting ready to play rook d7, so like even if my bishop needed to leave this square, at this point now I'm even ready for rook c7. So two extra pawns in the center. The position is reminiscent of a French, and it was pretty much as soon as we played c5 in the opening. It was like a French, but I had already traded the light square bishop off for his. You're telling me I get to play a French where I've already solved the problem of my worst piece in that opening, the light squared bishop? Thank you very much. I'll take that every time. Wonder what he's going to do. Knight c5, takes, knight d3, rook c7, rook d7. Could try to do something like that. Knight c5 may also run into other things though, like maybe knight c4. Pieces start to hang. So only blundering pawns here. Really, really not a bad showing at all from my opponent. But those pawns, admittedly, have been kind of valuable. They've both been center pawns. Okay. I like this move. I think it's a good move. It's a good attempt. Let's say a6, just to cover this. a5. You've got the right idea. So we can take this, but bishop a7, rook here, rook here. This is kind of what I meant. I feel like I have this idea covered now. So I'm not as scared of giving up that square because I'm just going to play rook d7. The bishop takes knight would have also been a nice move as well, right? Tough to say in this position about Luft. I would say bringing the king to the center is the best way to not get back rank mated or make Luft. But in general, you know, h3 with a dark square bishop always makes a bit less sense. So I would lean towards g3. King f1 looks like a pretty reasonable move here, though. Would a GM resign here if he was black? Not sure. You'd have to ask one. But I am a GM. Yep. That's correct. Like this move from the opponent. I'm going to go for this one, which is a little bit on the fancy side. But it kind of like, I guess, you can't really move this knight without hanging that knight. So the knights get a little bit jumbled up here. This pawn is hit. This pawn is hit. Maybe knight here, or obviously the knight could return, but that's a little uninspiring. So I would say perhaps that knight, that square makes a lot of sense. So I'm blocking the rook's communication with that knight. Meanwhile, any knight move loses that knight unless you go for that. So that move makes a ton of sense. If I go rook here, knight takes. I think the knight's actually getting trapped in there. So if I go rook here, I'm kind of wondering where you're going. Knight takes pawn, rook c7. It's not clear to me that you're actually getting out. Takes, there's no coming back this way. Rook c7, and there's actually no escape. So the only thing I can see that's maybe worth playing is knight c5, takes, e3, rook c8, takes, But then I can play rook takes, and at that point, I have my 2 extra pawns. We've now traded almost every piece on the board, right? Seems to me like that's exactly what I want, right? That's in my favor. Because I don't need to win a piece here. I'm up 2 pawns. This is more than enough. Takes. Still got these 2 extra pawns. Haven't forgot about them. Another good move from the opponent. We're going to continue with this plan. Rook c8, and it's like, yeah, you can take the knight. But what was the result of all that little exchange? We traded a pawn each, a bishop for a knight for a knight. Now we're going to trade a pair of rooks as well. This seems to only get closer and closer to my goal. Now, do you remember that other game we played where I said, hey, if you have a rook behind a passed pawn and you still have, apart from that, an advantage on one side of the board, like I have a 4-on-3 here, I said the easiest way to win is to take with the pawn, push the pawn as far as you can, and it's like you sit there and you wait for them to maybe take you, because anytime you trade the rooks, the game ends. It's over. King and pawn endgame is completely winning. So I'm going to take with the pawn, and truthfully, I'm going to motor that pawn up the board as far as he will let me. Rook takes c4 is a fantastic move. It really is. But this plan of taking and just shoving the pawn as far up the board as it'll go, you look like you are a dumbass here. Because the guy's like, what's this idiot doing? He's just allowing me to take the pawn. But that's what you want. That's part of your plan. Please take me. Do you know how much easier my life is when we're just playing a king and pawn endgame, which I know I'm going to win? This is way easier than having to play a whole rook endgame. My life just got simplified 10x by doing this. And I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to wait for you to take me. Thank you very much. Now, in this case, I could just go and take this pawn. But even if these pawns were not here, even if they were not on the board, this would be winning just because I can make a pass pawn here. So I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to say, take my pawn. You know, I'll wait. I'll wait. He doesn't want to take, but guess what? He's going to have to. We're going to go and make a pass pawn here. This is the same way that I would play to win if he did take my pawn. So I'm not changing my plan at all. G4, pretty much ignoring anything that's going on there. Just making a pass pawn, nothing to see here. But notice how much easier this endgame is. His rook is stuck, he literally cannot move his rook. It's so much easier to play this position. Right? If he ever moves the rook, I'm promoting. And even if the king is here, if he moves the rook, I'm promoting. Even though I lose the pawn, it forces an exchange of the rooks. It's just so much easier to win the position. All right, let's play g5 just to make him run out of pawn moves over there. This move isn't really relevant, but okay, there we go. He can't move. He can't move. And please take my pawn. I hope you can appreciate how much easier your life is when your opponent can't move an entire piece. Their only piece. The only move they can do with the rook is your dream position as well. Sure, it would be winning to play a rook endgame, but it takes a while, and okay, if your opponent has a rook on the board moving around, you can blunder pawns, you can make mistakes. Here, you really can't make a mistake. You just sit there and wait for him to take you. If he doesn't take, just pretend that these 3 things are not on the board. Pretend they're not there. I would just move this pawn up the board, right? Okay, we're just going to pretend these pieces don't exist. I'm just going to go up the board. Again, pretend these don't exist. Oh, he finally took. Well, there we go. And it's so much easier to win this position when it's just a king and pawn game. I got that 1 extra pawn in. That endgame was not even a struggle because we used this technique. And the king escorts the pawn up the board. As usual, guys, this is the point where my opponent is going to spend a long time thinking. This time I'm only joking, because I think he managed his time pretty well that game. And last couple games, although we've gotten the wins, and I think they've been some good games to learn things from, think about the amount of mistakes that my opponents have made. It's really just been blundering pawns. Of course, there's some strategic understanding differences, but I'd hope there is. The guy's playing a GM after all. But in terms of mistakes, blunders, it's like, really, people have just been blundering pawns and just slowly getting outplayed. It makes the game more instructive, but you also have to tip your hat to these 1300s who are definitely holding their own. That's not going to stop me from KOing him, though. Course not. Course not. GG. Time to hype my course. Well, Lolly, what I will say about my course, the checkmate course, it's called a checkmate course, but a lot of them just, if I had, a couple seconds on the clock here, maybe 5 seconds, I would still expect to give myself a really good chance to win this position, because putting the pawn up here is the only way to give yourself a chance to win. If you have a couple seconds and you're taking with the rook here, your opponent's going to keep their rook, you're going to get checked, it's going to be annoying. But this is the type of stuff that's in the course where it's like, it's more of a technique-based thing. It's like, what are the most practical ways that are the easiest to pre-move and leave your opponents with the, basically no counterplay every time. So it's like practical examples, how to execute things really easily without allowing counterplay right at the end of the game when you're about to win. So this is very much in the family of things that's included in the course. So it's stuff like this. There are many ways to win, but I do think that this is such an effective way. The course is available in our chessbrah store. There's a direct link to it, I think, !course, but you can also find it just in the chessbrah store. So where we sell all of our merch, this course will also be there. You'll see it. GM Amon Hambleton's Checkmate Fundamentals. Should you get the monthly group lessons? Well, I think it's definitely worth it. We might have a few gym members here. The chessbrah gym. It's been a good program. Basically, you get lessons with myself, Eric, other guest lecturers like sometimes Yasser or Ariantari. And it's about 4 lessons per month for $100. It's they're group lessons, but it's also a close you know, it's a close community, tight knit group of people, all with the same goal to improve. So you also end up, you know, usually becoming good buddies with the people in the class and playing training games together. It's helpful if you're trying to improve. But I would say it's more for the atmosphere of, you know, just that learning environment where everyone's trying to do the same thing. And you get lessons with GMs for basically 25 bucks per lesson. I mean, it's just not going to be more affordable than that to spend an hour, hour and a half with a grandmaster. Is my course a chessable course? No, it's. I recorded all the content. I made all the PGNs. I annotated them, did it all myself, and we packaged it together. And it's available, and it'll get delivered to you immediately after you purchase it. So, no, it's not connected to Chessable.